All right, so today we're diving into something that I think we all kind of struggle with,
Yeah.
and it's getting people hooked on what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You're scrolling through a sea of podcasts.
Right.
What makes you stop and listen?
Yeah.
So this deep dive is all about crafting those like irresistible podcast openings
Yeah.
that just make listeners hit subscribe instantly.
Oh, yeah. You're so right. It is the age of information overload, and
Yeah.
capturing attention
Mm-hmm.
is a total art.
It is.
And that's why we're breaking down some fantastic examples from an episode of History That Doesn't Suck,
Okay.
where they rank their top 7 favorite episode openings.
Okay, so get comfy
Yeah.
and imagine you're flipping through those podcast options.
Yeah.
What for you would make you stop and listen?
For me, it's a story that throws me right into the action.
Okay.
Imagine you're in a plaza in Mexico City.
Okay.
The year is 1847.
Uh-huh.
Gallows are up and a line of soldiers are about to be hanged for treason. That's how History That Doesn't Suck kicks off their episode on the St. Patrick's Battalion.
Whoa. That's a heavy image to start with.
Right.
Like the tension is palpable.
Mhm.
You immediately want to know, who are these men and why are they facing this like grim fate?
Exactly. And it turns out they're Irish Catholic immigrants who defected from the U.S. Army to fight for Mexico during the Mexican-American War.
Wow.
The podcast uses this gripping scene to draw you into a really complex story of prejudice, faith, and the very meaning of belonging.
It's almost like a movie scene, right? Like
Yeah.
you can see the rain-slicked cobblestones and feel the somber mood of the crowd.
Absolutely. It's immersive.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention.
And it cleverly highlights the battalion's commander, John Riley.
Okay.
He endured 59 lashes and was branded with a hot iron before this moment.
Oh my God.
So brutal details like that just drive home the injustice these soldiers face.
Yeah,
And prompts you to think about the choices they made.
it makes you think about what would you do in that situation?
Yeah.
This story resonates even today, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
It makes you think about immigration discrimination
Mm-hmm.
and the courage to fight for what you believe in, even when it means going against your own country.
Absolutely. And that's the power of a strong opening.
Yeah.
It can connect a historical event to contemporary
Yes.
issues, making it relevant
Yes.
to listeners' lives.
It does.
Now, from a tense plaza,
Okay.
let's shift gears to the vast and unforgiving landscape of the Oregon Trail.
Right.
This next opening takes a different approach,
Right.
focusing on a small, heartbreaking detail.
Oh, the Oregon Trail.
Oh,
It's, this classic tale of American westward expansion.
yeah,
But I'm guessing this opening digs deeper than just covered wagons and pioneer spirit.
you bet. It centers around the story of Letty,
Oh.
a young girl who accidentally drinks a bottle of laudanum
Oh, no.
and dies on the trail.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder of the fragility of life.
That's a gut punch. One minute, you're imagining the vastness of the prairie.
Mm-hmm.
The next, you're confronted with this personal tragedy.
Right.
It instantly personalizes the experience.
And what makes this opening even more effective is the juxtaposition of this devastating loss
Yeah.
with the incredible resilience of Letty's mother,
Okay.
who gives birth just days later and continues the grueling journey
Oh, my God.
while grieving her daughter.
That contrast is really powerful.
It is.
It speaks to the strength and determination of these pioneers
Yeah.
who faced just unimaginable hardships.
It certainly does. It also highlights the emotional toll, reminding us that history is more than just dates and battles.
Right.
It's about real people grappling with life and death.
Exactly. Now, our next stop takes us to the antebellum South,
Okay.
in the early life of a man who became a towering figure in the fight against slavery,
Yes.
Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass.
His story is one of incredible resilience and courage. I'm curious to hear what moment they chose to highlight in the opening.
Well, this one focuses on a pivotal moment in young Frederick's life.
Okay.
His fight with his cruel overseer, Edward Covey.
I can already feel the tension building.
Right.
This is a young man enslaved, standing up to his oppressor.
Yeah,
What a powerful image.
it is. And the podcast doesn't shy away from the brutal reality of
Yeah.
the situation.
Oh, yeah.
You hear about the fear, the rage,
Yeah.
the desperation in young Frederick's heart.
It makes you realize that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds,
Yeah.
there's this spark of defiance,
Uh-huh.
a refusal to be broken.
Exactly. And what's crucial here is how the story highlights Douglas's transformation.
Okay.
In that moment of resistance, he realizes he may be a slave physically,
Mm-hmm.
but he refuses to be enslaved in spirit.
Right.
This internal shift fuels his lifelong fight
Wow.
for freedom.
It's a powerful reminder that courage can come from the most unexpected places,
It can.
and that even small acts of resistance can have far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely. And this opening does a brilliant job of showcasing that theme right from the start,
Yeah,
drawing listeners into Douglas's remarkable journey.
it does.
Now let's travel across the Atlantic to Paris during the French Revolution,
Oh, okay.
where the next opening takes us to a scene of historical upheaval.
Ah, the French Revolution.
Oh,
A period of radical change and social upheaval.
total upheaval.
I'm picturing cobblestone streets, revolutionary fervor, and maybe a guillotine or two.
You're spot on. This opening does not hold back on the drama.
No.
It throws you right into the heart of Paris, where King Louis XVI is being led to the guillotine.
Wow. Talk about a way to start a story.
I know, right?
The king, the symbol of absolute power, being executed by his own people.
Yeah.
It sets the stage for a truly momentous period in history.
And the podcast uses vivid imagery
Okay.
to paint a picture of this somber procession.
Like what?
Imagine the rain,
Okay.
the fog, the drums beating the crowds lining the streets. It creates a sense of impending doom
Yeah.
and the weight of history unfolding.
It must have been a chilling spectacle.
Oh,
Knowing what we know now about the French Revolution, that execution marks a turning point,
yeah.
a shift in power that sent shockwaves throughout Europe and beyond.
And that's what makes this opening so effective.
Okay.
It not only captivates you with the drama of the moment,
Right.
but also hints at the far-reaching consequences of the French Revolution,
Yes.
even reaching across the Atlantic to the newly formed United States.
It reminds us that history is interconnected. Events happening in one part of the world can have ripple effects that shape the course of events elsewhere.
It's a chain reaction.
It is.
Speaking of interconnectedness, our next opening takes us back to America during the Revolutionary War
Okay.
and a thrilling escape that
Uh-huh.
involves some very familiar names.
Okay, back to America during the Revolution.
Yeah.
This is the era of founding fathers,
Yes.
daring battles, and
Yeah.
the birth of a nation.
The birth of a nation.
I'm ready for a dose of American history.
Well, you're in for a treat with this one.
Okay.
It's the story of Thomas Jefferson's narrow escape from British troops
Yeah.
who were intent on capturing him at his beloved Monticello.
Okay.
And the podcast throws you right into the action with Jack Jewett,
Oh.
a militiaman who learns of the British advance.
Zach Jewett, wasn't he the one who made that desperate midnight ride to warn Jefferson?
That's him. The podcast paints a vivid picture of his ride
Okay.
through the dark Virginia countryside,
Mhm.
branches whipping at his face
Yeah.
as he races against time.
You can practically hear the pounding of hooves and feel the urgency of his mission.
Yeah,
It's like a classic tale of heroism and danger
it is.
that immediately pulls you in.
But it's not just Jewett's bravery that makes this opening so captivating.
Okay.
It also sheds light on the often unsung heroes of the Revolution,
Okay.
specifically enslaved people.
I'm listening. Tell me more about how they were involved in this story.
Well, the podcast highlights Martin Hemmings,
Okay.
a slave at Monticello, who bravely confronts the British soldiers,
Wow.
risking his own life to protect Jefferson.
Wow, that's incredible.
Okay.
It's a reminder that history is full of unsung heroes
It is.
whose contributions often go unnoticed.
Totally.
It also adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of the Revolutionary War.
It does.
Like it wasn't just, this black and white
right.
good versus evil.
Exactly. This opening challenges us to look beyond the well-known figures and narratives
Okay.
to gain a more nuanced perspective on the past.
Mhm.
And it does so in a way that's both informative and entertaining.
Okay.
Now, from a daring escape, we move to a confrontation that has captured the imaginations of historians and artists
Okay.
for centuries.
I think I know where we're headed next.
You do.
The duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
You got it.
It's one of those historical events that feels like it's straight out of a movie.
He does.
Two larger-than-life figures. Their rivalry culminating in a fatal showdown.
Fatal showdown. This opening does not disappoint.
Okay.
It takes you to the misty morning on the Hudson River
Okay.
as Hamilton and Burr row across to the dueling grounds at Weehawken, New Jersey.
You can almost feel the tension in the air, hear the oars dipping into the water,
Yeah.
and knowing the outcome,
Right.
it adds this layer of tragedy.
It does. The podcast sets the scene beautifully, creating a sense of anticipation and dread.
Yes.
It's almost like you're a silent observer
Mm-hmm.
watching this historical drama unfold before your eyes.
And beyond the drama, it makes you think about the complexities of human nature.
It does.
Here are two brilliant men,
Yeah.
driven by ambition and rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
their lives intertwined in a way that ultimately leads to tragedy.
It's a powerful reminder that even the most intelligent and accomplished individuals
Right.
are not immune to the pitfalls of pride and ambition.
And now the moment we've been waiting for.
Here we go.
The #1 podcast opening.
The #1.
After all these captivating stories, I'm really curious to hear what they chose as their top pick.
Well, for the grand finale, we're heading back to the Civil War.
Okay.
But this time we're getting a very personal, visceral look
All right.
at the horrors of battle through the experience of a well-known figure.
Okay. The Civil War.
Yeah.
We've already touched on the Mexican-American War and the Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fitting that we're circling back to another pivotal moment
Yeah,
in American history.
absolutely. This opening doesn't shy away from the brutality of war.
Okay.
It focuses on General Ulysses S. Grant, but not in the way you might expect.
No, okay.
It starts with him at his headquarters,
Okay.
exhausted after a long day of skirmishing with Confederate troops.
Uh-huh.
A storm is raging outside,
Oh,
adding to the sense of unease.
it's like you're right there with him, feeling the exhaustion, the tension in the air.
Totally.
It's a reminder that even the generals, the ones leading the charge, were human beings
Yeah.
facing immense pressure and danger.
Yeah, exactly. And as Grant is trying to settle in for the night,
Oh.
he gets word of an impending attack.
Oh.
Despite the storm and his fatigue, he sets out for the front lines.
Knowing Grant's role in the Civil War, you can already sense the weight of responsibility on his shoulders.
And the podcast does a fantastic job of conveying the chaos and urgency of that moment.
Yeah.
But as Grant is making his way back to camp, something unexpected happens.
Oh, no.
His horse stumbles, throwing him into the mud.
Oh, no. That sounds painful. What happened next?
Well, he ends up with a badly injured leg,
Okay.
but there's no time to rest.
Right.
The Battle of Shiloh is about to begin, and he has to lead his troops.
Wow, what a way to start a story. It immediately grabs your attention,
Doesn't it?
but it also does something more.
Mm.
It humanizes this iconic figure.
Yes.
We often think of historical figures as like larger than life,
Yeah.
but this opening reminds us that they were also people who experienced pain, fear, and vulnerability.
It's a brilliant way to connect with listeners on an emotional level,
Yeah.
making them care about what happens next.
It does.
And it perfectly sets the stage for the brutal reality of the Battle of Shiloh,
Right.
which, as you know, is one of the bloodiest engagements
Yeah.
of the entire war.
I'm already hooked.
Good.
This deep dive into podcast openings has been fascinating.
It has.
We've journeyed from Mexico City to the Oregon Trail, from the American Revolution to the French Revolution,
We've been everywhere.
and now to the battlefields of the Civil War.
So much ground covered.
And with each story, we've learned a little more about the art of the hook.
We have. We've seen how these openings use vivid imagery,
Yes.
personal stories,
Mhm.
and dramatic tension to draw listeners in.
Yes.
But most importantly, they all share one thing in common.
What's that?
They make history relatable and meaningful.
Exactly. They remind us that history isn't just about dates and battles.
No.
It's about real people
Real people.
experiencing extraordinary events,
Yeah.
facing challenges, and leaving their mark on the world.
And on that note,
Okay.
let's take a quick break.
Right.
Before we dive into the remaining podcast openings on our list,
Okay.
when we come back, we'll continue our exploration of what makes a podcast opening truly captivating
Right.
and discuss some key takeaways that you can apply to your own storytelling.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so we've just explored some incredible podcast openings from history that doesn't suck,
Yeah,
and I'm already feeling inspired. It's amazing how a well-crafted opening can
it is.
draw you into a story,
Mm-hmm.
even if you weren't initially interested in the topic.
True. When we're hooked, we become more engaged, more invested in
Right.
what we're hearing.
Yes, and that's what we're aiming for, right?
Yeah.
To make history come alive, to make it relevant and exciting.
Exactly. And the techniques we've been discussing can be applied to any kind of storytelling.
Right.
Whether it's about historical events, personal anecdotes, or even something like a business presentation.
Okay, so before we move on to the next opening, I want to circle back to something you said earlier
Okay.
about the emotional impact of these stories.
Okay.
It's not just about presenting facts, it's about making the listener feel something.
That's a crucial point. Emotions are powerful drivers of attention and memory.
Right.
When we feel something, we're more likely to remember it.
So how do these podcasters achieve that emotional connection?
Well, they use a variety of techniques. One is through vivid imagery and sensory details.
Okay.
For example, in the story about the St. Patrick's Battalion,
Yeah.
we could picture the rain-slicked cobblestones hear the drums beating, almost smell the charred flesh
Right.
from the branding iron.
It's like you're right there in the plaza witnessing the events unfold. It's definitely not a passive listening experience.
Exactly. Another technique is focusing on the human element of the story.
Okay.
We're naturally drawn to stories about people,
Right.
especially when those stories involve struggle, triumph, or tragedy.
Like in the story about Letty on the Oregon Trail. It was that small detail, that relatable moment of a child wanting what her sister has,
Yeah,
that really tugged at the heartstrings.
totally. And the story about Frederick Douglass fighting back against his overseer,
Yes.
it was his courage and determination that resonated.
Yes.
We admire his strength, his refusal to be broken.
It's about finding those moments of human connection, those details that make the listener feel something,
Yes.
empathize with the characters, and connect with the story on a deeper level.
Precisely. And it's not just about negative emotions like sadness or fear.
Right.
It can also be about moments of joy, inspiration, or even humor.
I'm curious to see how the remaining openings on the list use these techniques. Shall we continue our countdown?
Absolutely. Let's see what other storytelling gems await us.
Oh.
We're going back to the Revolutionary War for this one,
Okay.
but this time we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at a daring escape.
Okay. A daring escape during the Revolutionary War. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's the story of Thomas Jefferson narrowly avoiding capture by British troops.
Okay.
And the opening sets the scene beautifully. We're introduced to Jack Jewett,
Okay.
a militiaman who learns of the British advance and sets off on a desperate midnight ride to warn Jefferson.
Jack Jewett. I remember learning about him in school, but it was probably just a paragraph in a textbook.
Right.
I'm ready to hear the full story.
Well, get ready for some high-stakes action. The podcast describes Jewett riding so hard through the woods that he's actually getting scarred by branches.
Oh my God.
It really paints a picture of the urgency and danger of the situation.
You can practically feel the adrenaline pumping as he races against time to warn Jefferson.
And then we see Jefferson initially dismissive of the threat,
Yeah.
finally realizing the danger and fleeing Monticello just minutes before the British arrive.
Talk about a close call.
I know.
It's a reminder of how precarious those early days of the nation were.
And this opening does something really clever.
Okay.
It uses this thrilling escape story to highlight the often overlooked contributions of enslaved people.
The American Revolution.
Oh, I'm interested to hear about that. Tell me more.
The podcast tells the story of Martin Hemmings,
Okay.
a slave
Mhm.
at Monticello,
Ah.
who bravely stands up to the British soldiers,
Wow.
risking his life to protect Jefferson.
Wow. That's incredible. It's a side of history we don't often hear about.
Right.
His actions were incredibly courageous.
They were. And it's a reminder that courage and loyalty can come from unexpected places.
Yeah.
It also challenges us to think critically about who gets to be called a hero
Right.
in our historical narratives.
It's a great example of how a well-crafted opening can do more than just hook the listener.
Mm-hmm.
It can also challenge our assumptions
Yeah.
and introduce us to new perspectives
Totally.
on historical events.
Okay. I'm ready for the next opening. What do we got?
This one takes us to a pivotal moment in early American history,
Huh?
a moment filled with drama and tension. It's the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
Hamilton and Burr.
Yeah.
Their rivalry is legendary.
Mm-hmm.
What a way to kick off an episode.
And what I find particularly effective about this opening is how it humanizes Hamilton.
Okay.
We see him in the hours leading up to the duel,
Okay.
writing a letter to his wife,
Right.
expressing his love and concern for his family.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the political drama,
Yeah,
but this detail reminds us that these were real people with families and emotions.
exactly.
Mhm.
It makes you realize that behind the political maneuvering and ambition,
Mm-hmm.
there were human hearts at stake.
And knowing the tragic outcome of the duel, it adds a layer of poignancy to this scene.
Yeah,
It makes you think about the consequences of actions taken in the heat of the moment.
it does. And the podcast uses vivid imagery to transport you to that fateful morning.
Okay.
The row across the Hudson in the early morning mist, the tense atmosphere on the dueling grounds,
Yeah.
the sunlight glinting off Hamilton's glasses
Wow.
as he prepares to face his fate.
That's like you're right there with him feeling the weight of the moment.
It's a masterclass in using sensory details to create an immersive experience for the listener. And now we've arrived at the top spot. Are you ready for the #1 podcast opening?
I'm on the edge of my seat. We've covered so much ground already,
I know.
from the Mexican-American War to the Oregon Trail.
Mhm.
From the American Revolution to the French Revolution, and now the duel between Hamilton and Burr.
Yeah.
What could possibly top all of that?
Well, for the grand finale, we're going back to the Civil War.
Okay.
But this time we're getting a very personal, very visceral look at the horrors of battle
Right.
through the experience of a well-known figure.
Okay, the Civil War. It's a period in American history that continues to fascinate and haunt us.
It does.
I'm curious to hear which story they chose to highlight.
This one focuses on General Ulysses S. Grant,
Okay.
but not in the way you might expect. It starts with him at his headquarters,
Okay.
exhausted after a long day of skirmishing with Confederate troops.
Uh,
A storm is raging outside, adding to the sense of unease.
it's like you're right there with him, feeling the exhaustion, the tension in the air. It's a reminder that even the generals, the ones leading the charge, were human beings
Yeah,
facing immense pressure and danger.
exactly. And as Grant is trying to settle in for the night, he gets word of an impending attack.
Uh-oh.
Despite the storm and his fatigue, he sets out for the front lines.
Knowing Grant's role in the Civil War, you can already sense the weight of responsibility
Yeah,
on his shoulders.
and the podcast does a fantastic job of conveying the chaos and urgency
Right.
at that moment. But as Grant is making his way back to camp, something unexpected happens.
Oh, no.
His horse stumbles, throwing him into the mud.
Oh, no. That sounds painful. What happened next?
Well, he ends up with a badly injured leg, but there's no time to rest.
Right.
The Battle of Shiloh is about to begin, and he has to lead his troops.
Wow, what a way to start a story. It immediately grabs your attention,
Doesn't it?
but it also does something more.
Yeah.
It humanizes this iconic figure. We often think of historical figures as larger than life,
Uh-huh.
but this opening reminds us that they were also people who experienced pain, fear, and vulnerability.
It's a brilliant way to connect with listeners on an emotional level.
Yes.
Making them care about what happens next.
Right.
And it perfectly sets the stage for the brutal reality of the Battle of Shiloh,
Right.
which, as you know, was one of the bloodiest engagements of the entire war.
This deep dive into podcast openings has been fascinating.
I know, it really has.
We've journeyed from Mexico City to the Oregon Trail, from the American Revolution to the French Revolution,
Yeah.
and now to the battlefields of the Civil War. And with each story, we've learned a little more about the art of the hook.
We've seen how these openings use vivid imagery, personal stories, and dramatic tension to draw listeners in.
Yes.
But most importantly, they all share one thing in common.
What's that?
They make history relatable and meaningful.
Exactly. They remind us that history isn't just about dates and battles.
No.
It's about real people experiencing extraordinary events, facing challenges, and leaving their mark on the world.
And on that note, let's transition to our final thoughts. What have we learned from these incredible podcast openings?
It's amazing how, like, a well-crafted podcast opening can just transport you to another time and place.
It's true.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From a tense plaza in Mexico City
Yeah.
to the vast expanse of the Oregon Trail,
Uh-huh.
from a daring escape during the American Revolution to the heart of the French Revolution,
Yeah.
and even to the muddy battlefields of the Civil War.
And what's remarkable is that each of these openings, while focusing on different historical events, uses similar techniques to captivate listeners.
You're right. We've seen how vivid imagery, personal stories, and a touch of drama can just make history come alive.
Exactly. It's about painting a picture with words, drawing the listener into the scene, and making them feel like they're right there in the thick of it.
I'm thinking back to the opening about the St. Patrick's Battalion. The way they described the gallows, the rain-slicked cobblestones, the somber mood of the crowd.
Right.
It was like you could feel the tension and the weight of history unfolding.
And that opening wasn't just about creating a dramatic scene.
Right.
It also prompted us to think about the complexities of identity belonging and the choices people make when faced with injustice.
And the story of Letty on the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
That small, heartbreaking detail about her accidental death. It instantly personalized the experience of westward expansion. It reminded us that history is more than just dates and battles.
Right.
It's about real people facing unimaginable challenges.
And then there was the opening about Frederick Douglass, his fight with the overseer.
Yes.
It was a powerful illustration of courage and resistance, highlighting the internal transformation that fueled his lifelong fight for freedom.
Each of these openings showcased a different aspect of history.
Yeah.
But they all shared one common goal:
And what was that?
to engage the listener, to make them care about the story,
Yeah.
and to leave them wanting to hear more.
And that's the essence of a great podcast opening, isn't it?
I think so.
To create an experience that is both informative and entertaining, to spark curiosity, and to leave the listener with a sense of wonder.
I think we can all agree that history that doesn't suck has mastered the art of the hook.
They have.
But what about the rest of us? What can we learn from these examples and apply to our own storytelling?
Well, one key takeaway is the importance of finding those moments that are both historically significant and emotionally resonant.
Okay.
It's about choosing stories that have the power to connect with listeners on a deeper level.
Right. And it's not just about the stories themselves, it's about how we tell them. We've seen how vivid language, sensory details, and a bit of drama can make all the difference.
Think about it this way. You're competing for attention in a world that's overflowing with information.
Right.
You have to find a way to cut through the noise and make your story stand out.
So if you're ever tasked with giving a presentation, writing a blog post, or even just telling a story to a friend,
Yeah,
remember the power of a good hook.
it's true.
It can make all the difference in capturing your audience's attention and leaving a lasting impression.
And don't be afraid to experiment.
Right.
Try different approaches. Play with language and see what resonates with your audience.
Yes.
The most important thing is to be authentic, to let your passion for the subject shine through.
Because when you're genuinely excited about something, it's contagious.
Absolutely. And that enthusiasm, that spark of passion, is what will ultimately draw people in and keep them listening.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the art of the podcast opening, I'm going to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Think about the stories you want to tell, the information you want to share.
Yeah.
How can you use the techniques we've discussed to make them more engaging, more memorable, and more impactful?
And remember, the best podcast openings aren't just about grabbing attention. They're about inviting listeners on a journey, sparking their curiosity, and leaving them with something to think about long after the episode ends.
So go out there and tell your stories. Make them captivating, make them meaningful, and most importantly, make them yours.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of the hook. We hope you've learned a few things that you can apply to your own storytelling.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of knowledge and ideas.